welcome to Read It with Whiskey, the place to be if you are a sci-fi or fantasy reader. My name is Laura and I am your host. I am a reader, writer, and whiskey drinker, and today we have a really fun topic. Okay, last time here in the bonus episodes, we talked about the T.B.R. that I have for 2023, and it's loaded, you guys. So today we're going to talk about how to choose your next book. So I did mention this in one of the previous episodes. I can't even remember now, but I talked about trying to choose what book you're going to be reading next, and it can be difficult sometimes. So we're going to talk about a few different tips and tricks you can use to decide what book on your TBR list you should be reading next. First of all, I should preface this with saying that I have a couple different TBRs. I have one TBR pile that is all for Read It with Whiskey, and those are my go-to books. Those are the books that I have at the top of the list because I need to read those books in order to interview the author for this show. So those books will always trump any other TBR list I have. However, if I just finished up a book for Read It with Whiskey and I don't have the mental capacity to really dive into another book, because think about it, I have to actually process the book, but also think about what I'm going to ask the author. So it can get kind of hairy in there while I'm reading a book for the podcast. So if I need a break from that type of mental reading, then that's when I'm going to go towards a different TBR list. I have a TBR list which is just for fun. This list includes books that are sequels to the Read It with Whiskey books that I feature in the show. These are also books that are just for fun, that I'm reading for no other reason than just to read them and escape from the sci-fi fantasy genre, to be honest. I do have a lot of books that are in other genres that I don't feature on the show, and it's kind of like a palate cleanser for me. And my final TBR list is professional development and self-help, basically nonfiction. I do have a list of books that I want to read for my author career. I have a list of books that I want to read for business development, professional development, and then occasionally I'll just throw in a random poetry book or a random book about self-help concepts. Minimalism is one that I like to read about. So yeah, I have a couple different TBR lists. So how do I decide what book am I going to read next? There are a bunch of lists out there of the books that you have to read before you die. And I think those lists are great for if you don't have any idea of what you want to read next. But to force yourself to read books that you don't actually want to read is kind of like punishing yourself. Like, why would you make yourself read a book if you have no interest in actually reading it? And obviously, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think if you have a book on your TBR, it's a book that you are excited to read. If you have a book on your TBR solely because it's in your Kindle app or it's been sitting on your shelf for 5 years, that book does not have to be read by you. You do not have to read that book. And that's something I wanted to start with because a lot of people say, oh, that book's been on my shelf for 5 years. I have to read it. I have to get to it. It has to be my next book. No, it doesn't. That book was purchased when you were a completely different person. 5 years ago, I can guarantee your book interests were different. You were reading a bunch of historical fiction like I was, or maybe you were reading all professional development, or maybe that was your steamy romance phase, right? Right now, you might be a completely different person and you might have a completely different mindset, and that book that you were excited to read 5 years ago might hold no purpose for you anymore. And that's okay. So take it off your TBR, okay? Take it off your list and do not pressure yourself to read a book that you don't want to read anymore, okay? This was a big lesson that I had to learn. I had a huge TBR of books that I had purchased through Amazon, through actual bookstores, from authors themselves, which is a really big one. If you buy an author from themselves, like, you should read it, right? But I'm not going to read a book just because it's on my shelf. Yes, it's in my TBR pile, but it doesn't have to be. And that is a big distinction. The books on your TBR should be books that you actually want to read. So that's my first challenge to you is look at your TBR and scratch off the books that you have no interest in reading. Just put them off to the side. You don't have to throw them away. Just put them off to the side and look at the 10 books that you truly do want to read and make that your TBR. If you have a TBR of 200 books, that's daunting. That's terrifying. So shorten it. pick your top 10, make those the books that you should have on your TBR list, and forget about the rest. Once you finish that list of 10, then go ahead, revisit the books that you have on your shelf. Okay, that is my biggest goal on how to choose a TBR. Make sure you actually want to read it. Now, when it comes to these 10 books that you have in your TBR list, it really depends on your mood, honestly. If you have 10 books and they are comprised of some murder mystery, there's a little bit of romance, and then there's some self-help books. What are you in the mood to read? That's the book you should read first. There's no reason that you have to read them in the order that you purchased. There's no reason that you have to read them in the order that they were published. There's no laws behind what to read next. So looking at that list of 10, which one are you drawn towards? Which one do you really feel motivated to read? And if it's the most recent book that you purchased, then read that book, because your other books aren't going to feel bad that you didn't pick them. I know we put a lot of emotions and actual like human features onto our books sometimes. Like, oh, I bought that book 3 weeks ago and I just bought this book now, so I have to read the book from 3 weeks ago. Otherwise, they're going to be upset that I didn't read them. That's not real, guys. They're not people. Yes, the author might be upset that you didn't read them first, but they'll never know. They will never know. So read the book that you are being pulled to the strongest. And let's talk about one other thing when it comes to your TBR and choosing a book. Have you ever been in a reading slump? I have been in reading slumps many a times. And I look at my list and I don't want to read any of those books. So what if this happens? What book do you choose? And again, this is going to be all based on your mood. So if you just read a slew of sci-fi and fantasy books, which I do a lot, then go ahead and find a contemporary romance. Go ahead and find a steamy book to read, or switch it up and read some poetry, read a memoir. That's a really good one to kind of break through that reading slump. Or the most controversial option ever, take a break from reading. Oh my gosh, this is terrifying. I don't ever want to take a break from reading. However, sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you need to take a break when you are in a reading slump and just forget about it. And I'm not going to touch on the DNFs, the did not finish books, because we're actually going to be talking about that in the next bonus episode that will be coming out on February 21st. So if you want to talk about DNFing books, then stay tuned for that episode. And finally, I would love to know what books are on your TBR. Send me your list of 10 books over on Instagram at Read It With Whiskey. I want to know what books are on your TBR, and I want to see if any of ours overlap. My TBR list is over there on Instagram right now, so definitely go and check it out. There's a mix of a couple different books. I've included books from all of my TBR lists, my Read It With Whiskey, my Just for Fun, and my business personal development nonfiction TBR. So check it out. Let's see if we're reading any of the same books at the same time. All right, you guys, it is that time. It is time for a reading, writing, and life update. And I haven't actually done one of these updates since before the new year, so this could be interesting. I'm going to try and keep it as short and sweet and to the point as possible. So we're going to start with reading. What am I reading? What have I been reading? Oh my goodness. I'm sure you would all be very happy to know that I finally finished Save the Cat. I finally finished Save the Cat by Jessica Brody. It took me a very long time to read this, and it's because there was so much content. I know I've talked about it before, so I won't elaborate on that, but it took me a very long time. I finished it in January. I'm very happy that I finished it, and I am like, let's move on. So I have moved on, and I am now reading a book by an author who has been on the show. I'm reading a book by Helen Shura, and this is her nonfiction, How to Write a Successful Series. And I bought this book right when it came out because I knew I wanted to write in series again. I have The Shockwave, which is post-apocalyptic sci-fi survival. It is complete. That trilogy is completely done. And I knew that I wanted to kind of structure series moving forward because I totally pantsed that thing. And I'm really happy with how it turned out and everything. But I wanted to have a little bit more structure. And so I picked up this book. So that is what I am reading now when it comes to nonfiction. When it comes to fiction, I'm finishing up the books that are going to last here on Read It with Whiskey through June. So I have a few more that I'm reading there. I'm not going to announce the titles right now. You'll be seeing those very, very soon. But those are the main books that I'm reading just for fun. And now the writing update, you guys. I haven't been doing any writing. Oh my gosh. My critique partner is not going to be happy to hear this. So back in November, I started writing a fantasy book, and I almost just said the title, and I'm not going to do that here. But I started writing a fantasy book, and I got like 54,000 words down. And then I was like, okay, January 1st, I'm going to start writing 500 to 1,000 words a day, and it's going to be amazing. Guess how many days I wrote in January? 0 words. I did not write anything in January. So I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. I'm giving myself grace because, winter cold seasons are supposed to be time for rest and rejuvenation. So I'm not pressuring myself, but I am struggling. That's for sure. I am also working on a prequel novella for the Shockwave, which gives a little bit of the background information to what happens in Transient Pulse, Oscillation Rising, and Static Equilibrium. So I'm really excited about this. I have no idea when it's going to come out, but it is percolating and being written, and you'll just have to wait and see. For more frequent writing updates, definitely head over to @LauraJLive on Instagram, because that is where I update way more frequently. Obviously, I haven't done one of these updates in over a month. So that is my reading, writing, and now life update. The new year was kind of just like, it's happening. I left my Christmas decorations up way too long. I have a few trips planned that I'm kind of like narrowing down and getting concrete for the first and second semester. Holy crap. I haven't been in school since like, like the early 20-teens, like 2014. Wow. Semester. That's crazy. Anyway, I've been trying to plan trips for the first and second quarters of the year, and I'm really excited about that. So maybe I'll share a little bit about that in here. We'll see. Most of that's going to be over on that Instagram as well, @LauraJLive, so check it out there. Other than that, life has been normal. I've been trying to get outside, even though it's freezing here in southern Indiana. I've been trying to get outside, go for walks every once in a while. I try to do at least 3 walks a week, and it's been tough. It's been tough. But yeah, other than that, life is going pretty good, pretty normal. Nothing extravagant to share. Pretty boring update for you, actually. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm just going to stop there because otherwise I will keep rambling. I'll just keep going. So there's my little reading and writing and life update for you. Next week on Read It with Whiskey, we have Herman Stornagel, and he is the author of Eclipse. And this is a first book in a space, not really space opera, but a space book, a space series. And I had so much fun talking to Herman about his books, and he has a couple other series out there as well, so definitely check him out. But next time, we will be talking to him, and it's a really fun episode, so stay tuned. I'll talk to you soon. You've been listening to an episode of Read It with Whiskey. I'm your host, Laura Juntunen, and I want to personally say thank you so much for listening. Your support of the podcast means so much to me, and I would love to get to know you. Hop on over to Instagram and follow us at Read It with Whiskey. Please chime in on this episode's post, share it on your social media and with your friends, and come back next time to hear more from self-published authors. I'll talk to you soon.